Let me give you one or two examples from the Gospels. And I'll choose deliberately non-miraculous cases so as not to be thought to be disputing or bringing into dispute the kinds of questions that we're talking about divine action. So in Matthew chapter 2, Jesus and Joseph and Mary have fled Bethlehem to avoid the slaughter of the innocents. They've sojourned in Egypt, and then word comes that the king who sought the child's life is dead. So they are moving on their way back up towards Jerusalem, and Joseph hears that Archelaus, the oldest son of Herod the Great, is reigning in his father's place in Jerusalem, and he's troubled by this. Now, here's the oddity. Herod the Great was a client king of the Romans. He was in good standing, and it was utterly natural that his oldest son should take at least some large segment of the kingdom. So when Joseph learns that Herod the Great is dead, he might reasonably infer that Archelaus is plausibly going to be ruling somewhere. He was already, in that knowledge, heading up toward Jerusalem. Why does this now come to him as a piece of unwelcome, troubling information? Well, Josephus, the Jewish historian, in his Antiquities, gives us the story behind this. So in Book 17 of the Antiquities, we discover that Archelaus took the throne just a few days before the Passover festival, where hundreds of thousands of Jews from all around the rim of the Mediterranean came and converged upon Jerusalem for a week-long festival. And just before Herod the Great had died, he had antagonized the Jews greatly by having some people executed for sedition. The Jews didn't feel it had been sedition at all. Well, the rumors and the accounts spread and people got angry. A large group of pilgrims, sacrifices over their shoulders, got into an argument with a smaller cohort of Roman soldiers. They stoned the soldiers. Most of the soldiers died. Archelaus, not yet certified as king by Rome, panicked. But the perpetrators had picked their sacrifices back up and run into the temple. So he sent a troop of horsemen to surround the temple, and then he sent troops directly into the temple, and he slaughtered 3,000 Passover pilgrims in the temple. Passover was canceled. He told the Jews, go home. Back on that road up from Egypt toward Jerusalem, and here's Joseph learning that Archelaus is reigning in his father's stead. But now we see the rest of the story. There was a homicidal maniac on the throne when they left, and there's a brand new homicidal maniac on the throne as they're returning. It makes complete sense now, in the fuller light of Josephus, that they should divert their course and go up into Galilee. That's just one example of a kind of historical interconnection. I'll give you another from a different gospel, just to show how this sort of thing works. In John chapter 4, Jesus has an interview with a woman at the well in Samaria. There they are sitting at the well of Sychar. She's a Samaritan, he's a Jew. And he tells her some things about her own past that shock her. And she says to him, Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Our fathers, their Samaritan forebears, worshipped in this mountain. Mount Gerizim is visible from Jacob's well. But you Jews say that we should worship down in Jerusalem. So she's asking Jesus to sort this out. Now, there's all sorts of wonderful and uplifting things that Jesus goes on to say there. But before he does that, he utters a very strange verse. It's John 4:22. He says, you do not know what you worship. We know what we worship, because salvation is from the Jews. Why does he say that? Is it just a bit of cultural chauvinism? I've asked several pastors this, and they've looked down and frowned a little and said, yes, I've seen that verse and I didn't know quite what to make of it. Well, again, Josephus, this Jewish historian, comes to our rescue. In Book 12 of the Antiquities, chapter 5, section 5, he talks about the intertestamental period and a mad Greek king, Antiochus, who believed himself to be the incarnation of Zeus, or as the Romans would say, of Jupiter. And he had a quarrel with the Jews and was coming down to besiege Jerusalem. The Samaritans were in the middle, and they were afraid of being caught between the hammer and the anvil. So they sent him a letter, and Josephus actually quotes the letter. They say, to Antiochus, the god, we are a thoroughly Hellenized people. It's true that we keep the Sabbath, but we wouldn't want you to mistake us for Jews on that account. We're really not Jews at all. It's true that we have a temple, but our temple here on Mount Gerizim, our temple doesn't even have a name. And we were wondering whether you would mind if, in your honor, we named our temple the Temple of Jupiter. And Antiochus wrote back, and he said, very well, do that. So they did. And then he bypassed them. And he came down and he sacked Jerusalem and sacrificed a pig on the altar there. Now come back to John chapter 4, where Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman, and she said, our temple or yours? Our fathers or your fathers? And he says, you don't even know what you worship. That temple, remind me, what was that called? Who were you worshiping? And suddenly the whole event comes clear, and we recognize this is not fictional elaboration. This has the ring of truth.